so FIFA has a specific amount of money allocated for clubs that have their players at the World Cup. It's calculated by $10,000 per day. So the number of days that the players spend at the World Cup, FIFA calculates it and gives it back to the club. This money has raised a lot of conversation on the Ghanaian media, the local media I should say. People are saying that if there's such an amount of money there, then why don't we take Ghanaian players there so that the clubs in Ghana can also make such an amount from this fund that FIFA will be giving out. In today's edition of Explainer, we are going to talk about whether the Ghana Football Association should deliberately take local-based players to the World Cup so that the clubs can benefit this amount of money or not. My name is Delali Frankaute. If it's your first time here, kindly subscribe to this YouTube channel. But without wasting your time, let's go straight into today's video. Great. So just as I said in my intro, FIFA has a specific amount of money allocated for clubs that have their players at the World Cup. It is calculated by $10,000 per day. So the minimum that the player will spend at the World Cup is literally 12 days. Because from the first game you play in the group stages all the way to the end of the group stages, you are likely to spend 12 days. If you do the addition and subtraction, that is literally around $120,000. And others are saying that that's huge money. And that is a good money for any Ghanaian Premier League club. So why don't then we take local-based players from the Ghana Premier League so that our clubs can benefit this amount of money? Today we are going to look into it and see whether it's something that we should consider or whether it's something that we should also not even consider. But before that, I want to give you a brief that whenever we go to the World Cup this year, FIFA has allowed countries to come in with 26 players in the World Cup, and that literally means that you can take more than the number of 23 players you can go. The argument here is that whenever Ghana goes to the World Cup, there are mostly some few players that goes to the World Cup and don't play. At least in our last 3 World Cups that we've been there have been at least 3 or 4 players that don't kick a ball at the World Cup. And that's why I'm saying that if you can go to the World Cup with at least 3 or 4 players not kicking a ball, then why don't you make conscious effort and inject these players, or inject is not a good word. Why don't the FA make conscious effort and make sure that Otuado are these 2 or 3 players from the Ghana Premier League there? This is what my take. First of all, I want us to look at this. Why does FIFA make these funds available? If you read about the policy and how FIFA runs it, it is on record that the player has to spend the last 2 years with the club. So the club that the player has played in the last 2 years, that is the club that received that amount of money. So FIFA purposely gives this money to the clubs because they've invested in the development of the players. If you go to Europe, for instance, the players like clubs like Manchester City, Chelsea, who are likely to benefit more, because according to reports, the last Euros, a club like Manchester City had as many as 18 to 19 players at the Euros. Chelsea is likely to have as many as 20 players at the World Cup, and they are going to make that amount of money. I'm going to use Manchester City as a case study here. City will have a lot of players there, and they are likely to benefit around $5 million from this particular fund. But let's take a look down to the players and the investment they make in these players and see if this amount of money is even enough money for them and the investments they do. If you look at a player like Kevin De Bruyne, who obviously will go to the World Cup, Kevin De Bruyne as a player is on a wage of £400,000 a week. If you look at a player like that, who goes to the World Cup and FIFA marks the player an appearance fee of, let's say, $10,000 per day. If you compare that to the wages of Kevin De Bruyne, clearly tells you that the amount of money that Manchester City spends on Kevin De Bruyne every single day to make sure that he's able to go to the World Cup and go and perform is obviously more than the amount of money that FIFA will be giving Manchester City. Now let's look at Thomas Partey, for instance, who will play in the Black Stars. If Ghana, I'm not saying Ghana will come out of the group stages, but if Ghana comes out of the group stages, that means 12 days, and that's $120,000 throughout the period. Partey's wage is around £200,000 per week. If you compare that to $120,000 a week, $120,000 in that 12 days, obviously, Arsenal will run at a loss. And obviously it means that the investment that Arsenal have made in Thomas Partey in the last 1 year or last 2 seasons cannot be compared to the amount of money that FIFA will be giving them. But for us in Ghana, that is huge amount of money because our dollar is office. It's somewhere along the way. And that means that any money that comes to you in dollars is huge amount of money. So first of all, I want us to settle this, that the fund is for developmental purpose. And if we compare the clubs in Europe that we see or we think they are going to make so amount of money, they have made a lot of investment in these players. And that comes to my next point. My next point is, how are we investing? And what's the development that we are doing to make sure that our players are always ready to perform at that highest level, that we can easily take our players to the World Cup. The fact that there's a conversation that the Football Association should make a conscious effort to insist that Otuado takes these local players there clearly means that we are indirectly admitting that the players are not at that highest level where they can play at the World Cup. And that is, personally, that is my problem. That if we are not able to develop at least 2-3 players that in every 4 years, when the World Cup comes up, a player from the Ghana Premier League cannot walk into the national team and at least not even play or command the starting 11, cannot even make the 26 players, then it means that we are not doing enough. And for me, that is where I want us to look at it. Yes, it would be great, $120,000 for a Ghana Premier League club, that is huge amount of money. But there's a chance for us to make more than that if we consciously make effort to develop our players like how the Europeans have done it. So for me, whether we should take a specific number of players to the World Cup or not, purposely for this money, will be dependent on whether we are consciously ready to make proper investment in our league. Others are even arguing that what is the guarantee that this $120,000 minimum, when it comes to the clubs, would they be able to invest directly back into the Ghana Premier League? And for me, that is something that we need to look at. If I'm saying yes, we should take players there, then I would urge the Ghana Football Association to insist that any club that your player goes to the World Cup based on this quota, that amount of money that will be given to you as a club, you should at least agree that you make a proper football project with it. Because clubs in Ghana have made good sales. Clubs in Ghana have sold players, but do they put the money back into football is a conversation for another day. And for me, in this video, all that I want to put across is that football money made in football goes back to it. A huge tax of whether they have to take these players and have an agreement with the clubs to whether share the money to the Football Association members or the money goes to the clubs themselves directly and what they do with it. There's been a lot of conversation, but I believe that if a club like Kumasi Asante or Accra House of Folk, let's say a free Bane because he was part of the squad that played a few last games. If a player like a free Bane goes to the World Cup and House of Folk makes this specific amount of money, which is maybe $120,000, and you tell them to come and share with when they were training a free Bane, there can be a good argument like that. But for me, I want us to take it to the next level and always look at it and say that, are we doing enough as a football community? What are we doing? What are the single clubs doing to invest in their single players to make sure that their players will at least be at that level when we are going to play at the World Cup? And for me, that is where I want us to take the conversation to. So for me, I would say that, yes, it's a good amount of money, but the fact that there's a conversation that we need to make room for these players means that we are agreeing that they don't merit the call-up. And that is my problem, that we need to get players that will merit the call-up. And also the purpose of that fund is to cushion clubs that have invested in their players. And that will mean that the bottom line here is development and the willingness to put the money back into football. Let me also know what you think. Do you think the FA should make at least room for at least 2-3 players to join the Black Stars purposely, because of that money. But for me, as I told you my opinion, I believe that is a reminder and a quick reminder for all of us to know that we are not doing enough to develop individual players here, and clubs as a whole need to start looking at it. Because I give you an example: if Thomas Partey is making £200,000 a week, and FIFA gives Arsenal $120,000, that's purely no money as compared to the amount of money that they invest in Thomas Partey. So this is what I'm going to bring today's video to an end. Let me also know what you think in the comment section. But until meet again, my name is Delali Frankaute. I have a new background. Let me also know what you think about my background in the comment section. If you like it, if there are some few things that I could do to make it look nice, I will appreciate it. But until meet again, my name is Delali Frankaute. Bye bye for now.